This meeting has been organized by the Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition, a community-led neighborhood coalition that respects the indigenous cultural worldview that is based in kinship, taking care of our community, the people, and the land, and sharing what we have with those around us. The process of revitalization here in Moss Park offers an opportunity through our Moss Park Social Development Plan to honor the histories of the Misagas, the Huron, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, as well as the peoples that have called Moss Park home over the last century, and to preserve the spirit of community, neighborliness, and advocacy that has been so vibrant within our community. We can acknowledge the history of the land and are committed to stewarding it and preserving it.
Moss Park historically is a bit unknown. It's been largely kept impervious to change. As the city changes around, Moss Park has kind of been isolated, and now it's going to be going through a massive transformation. The last time it's had done such a massive transformation was the 1960s, when the park was expanded and the Moss Park apartments were built. So that's about going on, 60 years. So it's a very important and pivotal time in this community's history to get involved and to be heard in order to help usher in this community to the future.
I'm going to quickly introduce Kumsa Baker, who's the campaigner with Toronto Community Benefits Network. And I want to acknowledge the support of Building Roots, a founding partner of the Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition, and also acknowledge the support of Neighborhood Pods. Kumsa?
Yeah, thank you, Waleed. Welcome everyone for joining today's meeting. We hope this will be an opportunity to share more information as well as get your feedback in terms of, important, changes that are happening in the Moss Park community. And so I'll be helping to facilitate today's conversation and wanted to introduce my co-facilitator for today, which is Waleed Kogwali Ali, who's an activist on affordable transit environmental stewardship, equity, and human rights. He is known for his work with residents to create safe, inclusive, sustainable communities that are free from discrimination. And he has also co-founded the Coalition Against White Supremacy. Waleed?
Thank you so much. So I just want to remind all our friends that the purpose of our meeting today is to inform the community about important decisions that will be made about the future of Moss Park over the next few months. We want to hear from you, and we want to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to get involved in the decisions that will affect the community and the lives of all Moss Park residents. I also want to acknowledge that February is Black History Month. So please get involved with programming that will raise awareness about anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and all forms of bigotry, as well as systemic oppression. I would like to invite Councillor Wong Tam. Councillor Wong Tam is the councillor representing Ward 13 Toronto Centre to share some solidarity messages and words with all of you. The councillor has been an advocate and supporter of the work of the Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition. Welcome, Councillor Wong Tam, Christine Wong Tam.
Thank you so much, Waleed, and thank you, Kamsa, for the invitation to participate. It's great to be here with you all today. It's always much better if we were together. That is always my preference, but unfortunately, the pandemic renders that unable to happen. I want to just invite also Megan to share her screen. And I just want to acknowledge that we do have a number of folks here who are from the community. It's been a very difficult time with the pandemic. Obviously, business is not as usual, not even at the City of Toronto, because we've still been in a state of emergency since March of 2020. Hard to imagine, but we're here now, 2 years later. So my opportunity and what I've been asked to do today is just to quickly present.
Really, the sky is the limit, and this is our first session. This space is.
Thank you very much. Sorry. I promise to get through these slides as quickly as possible, just so we can leave lots of time for Q&A. There are 15 slides for me to go through, and really what I want to do is just give you a little bit of snapshot of what is happening in the vicinity of Moss Park. Next slide, please. So many of you will know Moss Park, the green space, is sort of combined with a few other assets. So this is just an image of Moss Park facing the Queen Street elevation, but you know that within the Moss Park green space, I'm going to call it the campus, is that we have the John Innes Community Center, which is a facility that's at least 70 years old. Then we have the Moss Park Arena, which is run and operated with a board of management through the City of Toronto. Next slide. The next slide will show you what's on this campus right now. So right now, you know, there's a community center, there's a recreation facility, we have a children's playground, a wading pool, we've got the community gardens, a couple of tennis courts, and of course the big open space. Early on in 2015, there was a conversation within the community about how do we update this aging facility, especially with increasing new people coming into our neighborhoods, which was actually a good thing, but it also gave us a chance to start to rethink how do we make the very most of the city-owned assets. And if you move to the next slide, you can just take a quick peek at what the John Innes Community Center looks like. I don't need to tell you this, but it is woefully undersized and it is also aging. So the opportunity was really to see what could we do as the city to work with the community to then uplift this project so it actually could be just as nice as the Wellesley Community Center, just as nice as the Regent Park Aquatic Center, and even the athletic fields that we've seen that have been invested in other parts of the neighborhood, but it was now time for Moss Park. Next slide. So the reason I want to bring you this history of timeline is just so we understand how we got here today. It's not going to take very long, but I just want to sort of acknowledge that it began with a conversation with a private philanthropist who was very interested in making a donation, a sizable donation, to create a new athletic facility as potentially perhaps a legacy project, which was welcome. But unfortunately, over a period of time, it took a couple of years for us to realize this, is that the project was not going to be economically feasible, not in its current stage. So we end up taking a pause, and it's just the way things are sometimes. And we started to regroup, and instead of working with perhaps the philanthropists or the 519, it now has become wholly a city project. What is happening today is that we have to come back and re-envision what the Moss Park revitalization efforts were going to be. But we don't have to start from scratch because we get to build upon over 2,500 feasibility surveys that were submitted from local residents. We get to take the strength of what was already described to us with respect to what community members wanted, and then we build it back into the city process with a budget item, line item that will help us advance the program. I'm very pleased to say that in 2019, we created a Parks and Forestry Recreation Master Plan, which has Moss Park revitalization as a major component. So no more 519, no more private philanthropists. It is now a 100% city-funded project. And the good news is that it's being prioritized. Next slide, please. So all of this happened with some significant engagement, and that was a good thing. But we are now looking at some information that's a little bit dated. So the intention is to come back out and talk to community to confirm the vision. Next slide. Now, some of the things that we learned from those earlier conversations was that the community facility was undersized, so we need to increase the size. We needed to have a double gym. That's what people were asking for. They wanted to have a couple of pools. They wanted to have exterior upgrades to the interior and exterior of the community center and the recreation center. And they wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to serve the diverse population of Moss Park. All of those things were fantastic, which we are going to try to keep as much of. And we're still going to build even further upon that. And it's going to be coming very soon. So why did I tell you all that? I tell you all that because in June of this year, we were planning to come out to the community and share with all of you these new plans. The fact that now this was going to be entirely a city-funded project, that we had it built into the master plan of the City of Toronto's Parks, Forestry, Recreation Master Facilities. We were going to just come back and reconfirm the vision that we had heard back in 2016, 2018, and just to make sure that we are on track, because we were going to then start moving to some conceptual and more formal drawings before we put it out to bid, which means getting ourselves a contractor to build. Next slide. We obviously did not come out to the community this past summer because we also learned some information from Metrolinx. So Metrolinx, for everyone who is aware, is the transit agency for the provincial government. And they are building the Ontario line, which is a very large transit project, mostly underground subways, that will go from Ontario, from the Ontario Science Centre right down to Ontario Place. And it just happens to cut right across our community here in Moss Park. Now, the image you see before you was actually released in June 2021. So this is one of the reasons why we couldn't come back out to you. The city couldn't come back out to you to talk about reconfirming your vision so we can advance the Moss Park revitalization work, the community center, the recreation, the arena, the revitalization of park. We had to put it on pause temporarily until we understood what was the Ontario line and the Moss Park station as being proposed. What was it going to do to our neighborhood? So what we know is that you'll see a little blue line there. And that little blue line is almost half the park. And they call that the temporary staging area. So the transit agency, Metrolinx, is going to take over half the park. And they're going to be building a tunnel, because they have to put the tunnel underneath for the subway head station right on the south side of the park, which is facing Queen Street. And then they plan to build the station, a brand new subway station called Moss Park Station, right at the corner of Queen and Sherbourne. As you can imagine, that was not what the city was anticipating when we were getting ready to come back out to you with our new vision, with the budget request that was already approved. So we had to put it on pause, and I've spent the last few months trying to get Metrolinx to shrink the footprint, meaning that blue line is now halfway along the park. But originally, if you can believe it, they wanted the entire park. So they wanted the park from Gerrard down to Queen Street. And of course, that was not on for us. So we negotiated half the park as opposed to the entire park, but they will still have to have impact. What this also means is that all the trees along Queen Street are going to be chopped down. So they have an arborist report, which is basically a report that tells you the health of a tree. They have said that it's going to have to take place. They're going to take it down, and then they're going to replace it. This is a great time for the next slide. Thank you. So I'm going a little bit quickly just because I want to get to questions. So the image you see before you is the entire Ontario line. Obviously, it's condensed so it can fit onto your screen. And you can see that it starts at the Ontario Science Centre and then it terminates at Ontario Place. There are 3 stations in Toronto Centre, Corptown, which is just our neighbor to the east and the south. And then of course we have Moss Park. You're all very familiar with this patch. And then we have one coming, a 3rd station coming at Queen and Yonge. So next slide, please. Now, the Moss Park details as revealed, this is just another rendering, just to show you a little bit more detail, is that train is going to turn. The blue tracks you see there is the new subway. So it's going to scoop down to Corptown. Remember, I just told you it's to the east and south of you. And then it's going to curve back north and just bifurcate underneath Moss Park. So although they will, the Metrolinx will restore the park to some type of landscape condition, it means that they're going to take up half the park for a number of years. And right now it looks like it's probably going to be about 7 years of construction. Now, before you fall off your chair, let's just keep on going and I'll tell you what we've been trying to do about that. And it's okay if you do fall off your chair, because I literally fell off my chair when I first heard of it as well. So over the last 6 months, I've been doing everything I can with the support of my staff, as well as transportation staff at the City of Toronto, as well as city planning staff, including parks, forestry, recreation staff. We've been doing everything we can to tell Metrolinx to get off of Moss Park. Just because I know that area is obviously deficient with respect to a number of facilities, including parkland. And I'm also very, very mindful that, you know, construction is very disruptive. So we asked Metrolinx by way of motion. I did this at council, which meant that it had the support of city council, the support of the mayor. And we asked Metrolinx to convene a working group immediately and to start public meetings so we can start looking at alternative station locations. Do you have to be on Moss Park, meaning the campus? Can you be anywhere else? Do you have to take half the park? We already pushed you back from taking the entire park. You know, a lot of that was going to be disruptive. The other portion of the work that we asked them to do was, you know, can staff put together an equity impact assessment and take a look at what a community benefits proposal would be. So therefore, don't just give us construction for the sake of construction, and don't just build transit, although that's important, and we definitely want that, but what other good things can come out of that development of the station in Moss Park over the 7 years that will drive jobs to our local community, that will invest in our main streets, that will bring about good social changes that will actually uplift a community. So therefore, not only do we have to live with the community impacts of construction, what does the community get beyond a new subway station? And this is not to discount that transit is not important, because it absolutely is, but we've also learned from the good work that the community coalition benefits folks have done, is that it could be much more than that. So are they hiring locally? Are they procuring locally? Are they putting an equity lens over their procurement? How can it uplift our neighborhood, especially when we have so many people who are living precariously, when we have people who are vulnerable, who are low wage earners, and make sure those jobs that if they do come to the neighborhood, it can't be just labor jobs. It has to be jobs that lead people to perhaps a pathway to career. So therefore, you could end up being a supervisor. You could end up being a manager. You can start breaking off into transit-related careers, or perhaps urban planning, development. All those things could come out of the Ontario Line Moss Park Station community benefits package. The other thing that we really want to work hard on, because it was going to be disruptive, the province has said they're going to take over the city streets for about 7.5 years. I think our friends in Midtown can probably attest to the fact that that is on the best case scenario where everything works perfectly, meaning that the construction for the subway starts on time, is within budget, and stays on time. We have learned with the Eglinton Metrolinx Crosstown is that most likely it is not going to start on time. It could potentially go over budget, and it may not finish on time, which means that we're going to live with potentially 8, 9, 10 years of construction, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. So another request that City Council advanced, and I'm very pleased that they were able to support my motions, was that we asked them to do everything they can to provide financial supports for the businesses that were going to be impacted by the Ontario Line, and to make sure that there was a construction hub coordination. So therefore, residents like yourselves wouldn't have to be running from A to B. It's one-stop shopping that you can go to a hotline 24 hours and monitored, which now Metrolinx has agreed that they would do. I've also asked them to build a storefront. So build us a place right on Queen Street that the community can walk up to, knock on the door, they let you in, you can ask any questions you want of their staff, and they would make themselves available to you. Next slide. The other thing we asked for was that we asked Metrolinx to host a community liaison committee made up of Moss Park members. They are now in the early stages of developing that. I had advanced the terms of reference to Metrolinx back in April 2021, so some time ago now. And we haven't really gotten a response on the terms of reference from Metrolinx as of yet. And I actually developed this when I was working on the Corptown First Parliament site, anticipating that we would use a very similar type of terms of reference for all our stations. And the terms of reference has got to have deep, meaningful community engagement, a lot of public front-facing communication. It had to have, in my opinion, this is critical, TCHC involvement as well as TCHC tenant involvement. It's great to know that Barry Thomas is here today. We also needed to have a community benefits framework that was going to be created by the community, co-created by the community, and therefore financed and then hopefully implemented by Metrolinx. And the City of Toronto is very interested, and I as a local councillor am very interested in supporting that, because we just created our very own City of Toronto community benefits framework. So we have something to build upon. It's not like they have to invent it, and it's actually a really great framework. So there's a few other things that I want to go through. We're going to get to the very end. It's coming up very soon. I've got 3 more slides. The other thing that has just been released, and it's now available for you to comment on, and I have to admit, this is not my timeline. I've found working with a provincial body relatively challenging, largely because the reports come out, and then within 2 or 3 weeks you have to provide them comments. So they have just released their draft environmental impact assessment report, and they now want comments. And the comments are due until March the 9th. And what that report does, and you see the link on the screen, so feel free to take it if you need it. But that link basically gets you to their environmental assessment, which justifies and pretty much explains how they plan to build the subway, what type of local environmental conditions that have to be in place in order for the subway construction to take place. They're going to talk about proposals around mitigation, around monitoring. All of that will take place there. The other thing that they've done is that they've recently released letters. If there are any property owners in the area that they want to have some access to your property, either to purchase it permanently at market value, or perhaps they need temporary access, so therefore they can do some construction and staging and so forth and so forth. All of that, of course, I've now been advised has just gone out. So there's a lot happening. It's all happened in the last 6 months. And I can tell you it's been important for me to stay on top of, but even with my full attention, this project in our community is very, very large. So our next steps, and I'll just end off here and we'll open up for questions. Next steps, very quickly, I wanted to let you know that I'm still working with Councillor Cressy, Councillor Fletcher, the local MPPs, and the different stakeholders in the area to try to get Metrolinx to give us real community benefits. It is not easy because we don't have any details as of yet, but it is a priority for all parties involved. We want to be able to improve construction coordination. That's absolutely key. We know how impactful that can be. We want to make sure that Metrolinx is open and transparent. That's important for all of us. It makes good business sense as well. And then of course the city staff, because I showed you the early part of the revitalization of Moss Park. We want to come back now that we have a better idea of what Metrolinx is doing. We'd like to come back and offer you the same intention that we had back in June 2021, and then reconnect with you about the recommitment, the reconfirmation of the vision for the Moss Park revitalization. And then we would like to ultimately get to construction detail drawings, tender the project so we can build the community center. And this is going to be done side by side with the Ontario line so that we're not getting in their way, they're not in our way. And we'd like to deliver the community center, the arena renovations, as well as the park, or at least portions of it, before the Ontario line is finished so that the community can have access to it well before the station is complete. That brings me to the end of my conclusion, the end of my presentation. Sorry for going so quickly, but I do have some opportunities if you want to send me questions or you can ask me questions. That was a lot, and I appreciate that I spoke very quickly, but I just needed to get that information to you, and hopefully it was comprehensible. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.
Awesome.
Councilor Wong-Tam. Does anyone have any quick questions? Because we're going to move on to the agenda. Seeing none, just going to quickly share the screen.
Okay, Waleed, I have to head off to another meeting. I'm sorry I can't stay for the whole event. I'll try to see if I can pop back in. But have a great meeting, everybody. If I'm not here, I believe my staff, Megan Poole and Felicity Campbell, will stay with you folks. So they would also be able to answer any questions if you type them into the chat.
Thank you, Councilor Longtime. We'll appreciate it. We appreciate your participation today and your attendance. And if you would like to come back, we will love your participation. And thank you so much for your staff supporting us for the rest of the meeting.
Take care.
Thank you. So we've got about 31 people who've joined us so far, more people joining in. I'm just gonna pass on the agenda to Mr. Baker. So Mr. Baker, do you want to review the agenda?
Sure. Thank you everyone for joining the session today. For the agenda that we have scheduled, we're hoping to wrap up by 8 o'clock today. We're going to share a little bit more information about the coalition and who we are and some of the activities that we've undertaken. Some of you may have seen us already active in the community over the past summer. And so we'll share a little bit of what some of the activities and things that we've been doing in the community over the past few months. We'll also share more about the Moss Park Subway, Ontario Line, and Metrolinx. I think the City Councillor had a great presentation, and so we may be able to skip through some of the information that is that has already been shared. And then we want to be able to open it up to discuss community priorities. And so I know Kais from Building Roots is going to share a little bit more of what we've been hearing already from the community, and we also want to get more feedback in terms of additional feedback or issues or priorities that are important to you that we can continue to identify and see how we can create solutions to some of the challenges. And before we wrap up, we'll go into actions and next steps. So, before we leave the meeting, we want to identify some immediate actions and next steps and how you can be involved in supporting this engagement and advocacy, over the next few months, because it'll be a really critical time where key decisions will be made about this project. Next slide. Awesome. So at this point, we'll introduce my colleague Darcy from Building Roots, who will, or Lisa from Building Roots, who will share more about the coalition and the work that we've been doing. Lisa?
So I'd like to thank Kristen and her staff. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for that. I'm Lisa Cates. I'm one of the founding partners of Building Roots, and my partner Darcy Higgins is also on this call. And I see that some of our team members are as well, which is great. Building Roots has been working in Moss Park for many years now, and you'll probably know us by the ship and container grocery store called the Moss Park Market. And we have enjoyed a partnership with Toronto Community Housing that has enabled that market to be there. We believe that the residents of Moss Park have a lot of ideas. They have a lot of passion for their community, and we are there to support them through the coalition, through Metrolinx, through all the development that's going to be happening. And on Saturdays, we have a coffee and conversations table outside the market where you can come and comment on Metrolinx, make your wishes known, make your concerns known, and Building Roots is there. We've always been there, and we will always be there to listen to the residents, and we feel it's very, very important to include them in everything that is going on. And that's why this coalition is extremely important, so that we can gather everybody's thoughts, everybody's concerns, and bring everybody together as a community. Like this slide says, stronger together. Building Roots definitely believes we can all work together and create cohesion around what is about to happen in Moss Park. And I'd like to mention that Leona, Leona stepped away. She is one of our resident leaders. Hey, Leona. And she is, she's a very strong advocate for the residents of Moss Park, and she's always been a terrific leader for Building Roots. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to Darcy.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm a co-founder of Building Roots with Lisa, and thanks for joining us. We'll keep it going quickly. Can you go next slide? So I'll just introduce the coalition and what we're about. The Moss Park Coalition started last year, and we're working together with different groups and residents. And we came together through conversations based in the fact that a lot of changes are coming to Moss Park. The subway station is kind of ignition for this new coalition, and Moss Park doesn't have a residents association. Regent Park has one, St. Lawrence has one. So this is an opportunity to start building the community up, and really we've always been there with Building Roots to provide the community voice through the process that the councillor mentioned with the development of the previous ideas about the community center. And when the community center stopped, the plan stopped, we advocated at that point, and so we're there again now. And so we want to really use this opportunity as Moss Park is going to change, and there's many developments, and we're going to show you some of them, that it's necessary to make some changes and to imagine what we can have for Moss Park and how to make it better and how to bring the priorities of the residents to the city, to Metrolinx, and see what we can do together. So next slide, we're working with CUMSA and the Toronto Community Benefits Network, and they've been working across the city on trying to increase the community benefits from these major projects. When Lisa and I started Building Roots, we looked at how can you use condo developments or anything like that to build new community markets or gardens and things like that. And the network is also looking at job creation and other benefits. Next slide. We're also working with other partners like Andre at the Bridge, and he'll be speaking next with Corptown Residents Association, Corptown Residents and Businesses, and Waleed here and some of our residents. So our goal is to create a broad-based coalition, and it's great that TCHC is represented here. David Morris, thanks for coming. We want to have everyone's support and work with the neighbors around the downtown east that we can create a community benefits plan, look at the park, look at the community center, and see what we can do, and really make something really excellent for Moss Park. And at the same time, look at some of the challenges that's going to come along with the development in the neighborhood and this station along Queen Street. Next slide. So we've been advocating, as I mentioned before, since the More Moss Park project that the 519 plan has started and engaged a lot about the last few years, and now into the coalition starting last year. We've been having tours to learn about the neighborhood. Andre has helped to share information about the history of the community and the heritage as well. And Mac and now Kais have been reaching out and talking to people at the Moss Park Market. So hundreds of people come by there, so it's a great opportunity. And Kais will talk a bit about what he's heard and what we've heard people's concerns are. And then we also advocated with the councillor to have a Moss Park working group that Metrolinx is running, and with Andre as the community co-chair. So that's an opportunity to get involved. Metrolinx staff have come out to Moss Park, and we've had welcome everyone to come and talk to us. Grab a coffee every Sunday at Moss Park Market and chat about this project with Kais and with others. So next, coming forward, we want to bring all the concerns of the community together and identify opportunities for the priorities of the community and bring that to the city and to Metrolinx. and keep advocating. And we're
Okay,
gonna be
thank
really
you.
focused on that.
Okay, thank
Justin,
you.
sorry, could you mute? No, thanks. And community benefits framework. We'll talk a bit more about that. There's some big words and some different things. This is new for Moss Park because we haven't really had this level of advocacy before, but it's a really great start with so many people attending and the councillor really making this a priority. So if we work together, we can make something good happen. So next slide, I think we'll pass this on to Kumsa and to Andre to share more about the project.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darcy. And the next few slides will go into a little bit more of a background about who is Metrolinx and a little bit about the project itself, the Moss Park Station. I'll probably go through very quickly because I know some of the information was already covered by the city councillor in her presentation. And so I guess if we can go to next slide. Awesome, thank you. So Metrolinx, so what is Metrolinx? So for some of you may be hearing for the first time, Metrolinx. So it is a provincial authority. So they're established out of the provincial government to help with developing and planning new transit projects in the city of Toronto. And so Metrolinx as a government agency, one of the projects that they are responsible for is the Ontario Line project that we're discussing today. We also, next slide. So the project itself, in total, is about 15 stations. So the beginning of the station, the beginning of the line will start near the Science Center at the north, and it'll go all the way south through the DVP to the downtown area into Corptown, Moss Park, and then and it'll end off at the exhibition place in the West End. So it's a fairly overall, it's a fairly large project. In total, the government is expecting that the project cost will be north of $10.9 billion. And all of this is going to be funded by government. So some of the money involves federal funding. So the federal government provides money to the provinces to build these transit projects, and this specific Ontario line will be the largest transit project in the history of Ontario. So just to give you a little bit more of the significance of this investment, especially public investment that's going into this project. Next slide. I won't go into too much details, but as of right now, in terms of timelines, Metrolinx is expecting that the construction of the Moss Park will start in the summer of 2023. And so right now they're actively working to finalize the plans for the Moss Park. And so you heard from the councillor in terms of, can we look at alternative stations? Could we reduce the footprint of the site to make sure the park is not impacted? All of those final decisions will be made in the next few months. And so that's why it's very important that before these plans are finalized and before construction starts next year, that as a community, we're able to, explore, alternative solutions to some of the concerns that we have. Next slide. This is another good visual about from the Moss Park area itself. I know we've gone through, the councillor went through this in quite detail, but just gives you another visual in terms of what is going to be the sort of where the station is going to be versus where the Metrolinx is going to be using for construction staging in the middle of the park. And then also potentially where other resources or rec center could potentially be developed. Next stage. Next slide. Next slide. So I think in terms of Moss Park itself, I think, given that some of the changes, one of the things that we know is that for sure green space will be impacted, which is a concern that we've continued to hear. It also is very unclear in terms of what decisions have been made in discussion with the City of Toronto, and if and when the community will be consulted. And so you heard from the City Councillor that their City of Toronto's consultation process is paused, and so we're still expecting to see more information in terms of when there will be additional engagement, both from Metrolinx and the City of Toronto as it relates to some of the plans that are in place for the park. Well, I think in terms of some of the things that could be advocated for includes a revitalized community center. And so that's something that we're going to be monitoring as well to make sure that both Metrolinx and the city is invested in actually creating a better recreation center at Moss Park. The other thing to also note, I think, as well, is that as we see this new station being planned, of the other changes that are happening in the surrounding community, especially when it comes to development. One of the things that you'll see here is a map that I took from the City of Toronto website, and you'll see that for each of the bullet points is pretty much indicating where has been development activity. And so there's been interest from a developer to rezone or rebuild some of the different spaces along Queen, to the south of Queen, as well as north of the park. And over the past couple of months and also coming up, we're going to continue to see more of those consultations coming up where developers see all of this new transit being built and want to leverage that opportunity and be able to build more housing close to transit. And I think that is also something that we've heard in terms of what are going to be some of the broader impacts to the community, both from transit as well as these private development projects. Will it be housing that's built, affordably, or is it just going to be housing for the private market? So all these type of questions are starting to come up, and is going to be important that many of you are involved in helping to shape and also ensure that as the physical nature of the community changes, the train is being built, stations are being built, new condos are being built, that we don't forget the social development of the community and actually the people who are going to be impacted, and how do we support people as the community and all of this infrastructure is changing in the wider neighborhood. And so, yeah, we look forward for your engagement, especially as it relates to identifying priorities. I know we're going to have an opportunity to have some more feedback and dialogue in this meeting in terms of what are some of the key priorities that we want to bring forward as a coalition to Metrolinx and to the city. Next slide. Awesome. At this point, I will turn it over to my colleague, Andre, who will speak a little bit more to his involvement with both the project and also with the community liaison committee that has recently been formed by Metrolinx. Andre?
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you, Kumsa, for the kind introduction. For those who don't know me, my name is Andre Berman. I'm a former resident of Moss Park. I am currently the publisher of the Bridge Community newspaper, which is a monthly newsprint that circulates in the downtown east. As mentioned by Darcy, the Bridge and Building Roots has been partners since the beginning of the Bridge. That's almost 2 years ago, and we've worked very closely to help disseminate information to folks in Moss Park about various initiatives, and obviously now with the subway, and a very important infrastructure project. I also chair a neighboring resident association in Corptown called the Corptown Residents and Business Association. And if you remember from the councillor slide, there is a Corptown station being planned at Front in Berkeley. So if you know where the Staples site is, that is where an adjacent station is going to be located. And the organization that I chair has been involved in numerous conversations with Metrolinx about that subway site. But what it differs between the Corptown and Moss Park station is that Corptown has also been designated a transit-oriented community, which means not only is there going to be a subway station being built there, but there's going to be a significant vertical housing component. So that means condominiums and commercial buildings to help densify this area of downtown. And if you're a resident around here, you will know that there has been unbridled number of development applications coming in. And as Coombs made mention, the subway build or the planned subway build is only going to spur more development applications as the private sector begins to notice that what they consider to be underutilized areas such as Moss Park now has a very lucrative future because of it being a major transit area site. So I volunteered my services to become co-chair of the Community Liaison Committee with Metrolinx. My position has not been confirmed. It's just temporary until it either is confirmed with them or someone else comes, which I'm happy to step aside, but I am doing it as of right now. And essentially my job is to continue conversations with organizations like the Moss Park Community Benefits Organization and their partners like Building Roots, and also the business community as well, which is going to be significantly impacted by this development. And so having some experience with Metrolinx, what I would like to say to everyone here is you need to participate. You need to try to do your best to get involved in these conversations. And I know sometimes that can be, there are some hurdles involved with that. But that is why you have Building Roots and other partners to help facilitate your needs and wants to get to the right ears. And that's not only just Metrolinx, but it's also city representatives and provincial representatives. You know, there's going to be some massive changes going on here, and Moss Park historically is a bit unknown to those. It's been largely kept impervious to change. As the city changes around, Moss Park has kind of been isolated, and now it's going to be going through a massive transformation. The last time it's had done such a massive transformation was the 1960s, when the park was expanded and the Moss Park apartments were built. So that's about going on, 60 years. So it's a very important and pivotal time in this community's history to get involved and to be heard in order to help usher in this community to the future. And I know it's a little bit scary for many, including myself, because these changes are coming so rapidly. And sometimes you feel a little bit helpless, but the only way to build resolve and to help coalesce all our needs and wants is you have to participate, you have to be heard, and put pressure on your municipal representatives and your provincial representatives. And this can be done, as I said, through the facilitation of the Community Benefits Network. So I'll leave my comments to that. We don't have our next date for the Liaison Committee yet. Metrolinx, again, as mentioned by Kristen Wong-Tam, our counselor, they've just released their new environmental impacts assessment, and they're gearing up for a number of consultations for that. So I hope they haven't forgotten about us, because these are important conversations we should be having. But I'm sure Wong-Tam's office is putting pressure on them, as I have been over the previous weeks, to try and get them to commit to a date so we can continue the conversation we had at the end of last year. So that's it. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Wong-Tam's office, for that presentation. I must go. I have to chair another meeting, but if you have any questions, you can facilitate that through the community benefits email. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you, Andrew.
So community priorities is our next item.
Yep. I guess that's me, Walid.
Go ahead, guys.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Kais Azad, and I'm also supporting some of the great work that the Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition is doing. And I'm happy and so glad that we have such an amazing turnout, and that such an important information is able to go out there and be able to have our voices heard. So that's really amazing. And yeah, so next slide. Awesome. So every sort of Saturday, Building Roots has the Moss Park Market, and we are there, speaking with residents of the neighborhood, and I'm there for a few hours also, just helping to understand how our community members are feeling about the developments and actually what's going on, and some of the important points that we've been able to take. Just by speaking with residents, is the fact that some are unaware that the subway is actually coming into the neighborhood. That's been, I would say, the majority of the time I've been speaking with residents is being unaware of such a development, not in just this neighborhood, but in also surrounding neighborhoods as well. Another point that we've also raised is housing. We do have housing needs in this community in terms of how we're able to support people who are living under certain conditions, who are maybe afflicted with certain situations and difficulties. How are we supposed to be able to create developments and opportunities to be able to give them adequate housing? Also, another concern that we've seen in the community is with the development of the subway station and what's going to go on in the park. There has been a concern for construction and the disturbance that the construction is going to be able to cause for residents in the community and those community as well. So, and we've seen that in many communities as well, and how construction can be an obstacle for being able to carry out your daily duties, and whether it's going to school or just going to the gym, it becomes a big obstacle. And a lot of the time, I think the other day that I was able to speak with a resident, when I mentioned sort of the subway station, they brought up the fact whether or not the Moss Park apartments were going to be revitalized. So that was something that really caught my eye in terms of, maybe this subway station is not something that our residents really know much about. And maybe the revitalization of the buildings is something that they've been able to see around certain neighborhoods, that we need to be able to have these conversations about this new subway, and sort of the revitalization to the community center and to the park as well. So these are all really, really important things that we definitely need to consider, as it impacts the whole community as a whole, whether it's small businesses, many stakeholders in the neighborhood, whether it has to do with like affordable food and housing. These are all things that we need to consider in terms of what these developments can be doing. In terms of that, I can also open up the floor to anybody who'd like to unmute or put into the chat what your priorities are actually in terms of these developments that are happening. What are things that you've been hearing, and what are some of those instances that you've had with these developments? And feel free to put into the chat as well, and unmute if you'd like. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so the goal that we are trying to sort of get to is to be able to have collaboration between community and when it comes to developers as well. So we want to be able to work with the City of Toronto and Metrolinx to be able to understand Moss Park and actually lead the development. It's one thing when things are being developed in a community and resources are being made available, but those resources and services need to be tailored to that community so that it can basically impact and benefit in the best way that's possible. So we need to be able to have partnered collaboration. We need to have community decision making with everybody involved. We need to have everybody's voices heard. We need to have early consultation and information sharing so we know when things are happening and when important decisions are being made. And we need to be able to know what's actually going on. So transparency is important on both levels, from developers, and so those things need to be communicated as well. And also, like we've mentioned, a commitment to Moss Park as a neighborhood. We need to be able to understand Moss Park, and that needs to be able to lead the development that's going on. Moss Park has a really rich history, and we need to be able to preserve that history and sense of community when these developments are happening. And unfortunately, some developments that do happen in certain areas of the city are even in the province as well, when developments happen, you sort of lose that sense of community and that culture, which has been preserved for such a long time. So that's something we need to work on. A lot of the same points here. We need to be able to advocate for, improved recreation centers, because the recreation centers are sort of like the heart, I would say, that provide all those amazing services for our community, just like how we've seen in communities like Regent Park that are making use of a revitalized community center and are able to carry out, activities that probably weren't, able to be carried out, in the past. Community benefits agreements for the Ontario line, that's also really important that we've mentioned throughout our presentation. A Moss Park social development plan. You must have heard regarding the Regent Park SDP, Regent Park Social Development Plan, that Regent Park actually has, and it's a meeting that can occur. And due to the revitalization, there's a lot of things that the community has in terms of inputs and what they'd like to see going forward. Community involvement is so important when it comes to revitalization, and hopefully this is something that we can get with the Moss Park development as well. So at this point, any questions or comments or concerns that anybody has, feel free to unmute, raise your hands, unmute, or put it directly into the chat.
I see some comments in the chat. So I just want to thank Rasha. Rasha said, yes, City Council has voted in favor of inclusionary zoning. However, the province of Ontario needs to approve this new policies. So the more questions about jurisdiction, and this is the province that's going to be making that decision. So thank you, Rasha, for asking. Well, thank you, Megan, actually, for answering Rasha's question. Thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions? Because we want to have a helpful conversation. So I think the next thing we're going to do is we're going to share a discussion question to get us thinking about, what we want to see or what we are thinking about this proposed project. Okay. And please do share all this content on the chat. This is very helpful.
Please share any ideas or concerns you have. Doesn't need to be about a fancy report, but anything, that is important for you living in Moss Park.
So maybe a simple question is, what is one important need you wish to be addressed through this new developments? So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask folks to share. I'd like to go first. Leona, you want to speak?
I like the idea of everything going forward. What Christian Pam said, it sounds very intriguing, very exciting. But I don't. Anybody know them? I don't know. Going out to door, getting people to get their feedback. I think it would be very confusing. They would probably think they're moving out. That kind of thing, like how small is our park going to be? And because we have a connection with NIP, and it's like we do our Moss Park Festival every year, and it's like, how much small space are we going to have? Because I'm involved in it. So I don't know if that would be very helpful to Gladys to see that how small is our park going to be? Is it going to be cut in half, and how much? You know what I mean? Because of the instruction, she's going to be living when she hears about this. I like the idea of what Christian Pam said. The projects that she said is great. I'm looking forward to hear more about the revitalizing, about the John Ennis, that we did start it and then it went downhill, and it's like, oh my God. I'm looking forward to now see this go up, and it's like how, a long process there, and it just seems like overwhelming already. And it's like, wow. So it's going to be very interesting to see how many people, take effect of this. I think door to door would be great to get people's feedback.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, how disappointing the 519 was, Leona, to everybody. But I think in this situation where you have so many people behind you, like the Coalition and Building Roots and the Bridge, and there's a lot of people, Kristen Wong Tam, Barry's here from Toronto Community Housing, And there's a lot of people involved here. So the Moss Park residents and the community, you're not alone. So
No, I'm okay with it. I think just a lot of people get very confused and like, what's gonna happen to our park?
no, I get
So,
that for sure. But the
And-
more that we talk, even encouraging them to come to coffee and conversations on Saturday, just, go by
Okay.
and have a cup of coffee, just to talk. And we're paying attention. And we'll relay everything back to Metrolinx eventually. And if the concern is about the park, then let's hear about it.
Yeah, I think that's my concern is how small is our park gonna be, because we do the NIP does their festival every year, and Gladys is gonna be very disappointed if it's only a little bit. It's like, won't be the big thing like we always do.
Mm.
I don't know.
It's gonna be that part they were talking about, the park around John Innes. So they're not
Not
gonna
our park
build,
here.
No,
Right.
not the Moss Park apartment park.
Okay, I'm confused then, because I thought we were talking about here, and all the equipment is everything's gonna be right outside
Yeah.
our front door.
Oh, no.
Okay,
but the station will be on Queen Street, right?
I
So
got that.
we're looking at that effect on the market, on the property, like how it's gonna affect around Queen Street or around the apartments. So
Yes.
we'll have to keep an eye on that and share more information.
Yeah,
Okay,
but it's just, staying involved, staying connected, growing the conversation. It's something that we've always wanted to see in Moss Park. And this is a terrific opportunity.
Yeah. I
Absolutely.
just want to acknowledge that, this conversation is being taken very seriously, right? Not just by Metrolinx, by a counselor, but we've got representation, from Minister Marcy Ian's office. So Narella, welcome. And we've also, got David Morris, who's a Liberal candidate, in the upcoming provincial elections. And we've been engaging with representatives on this issue. But what we want to do right now is want to hear from you. We actually want to hear from folks in this meeting. And I want to thank folks from Toronto Community Housing for joining us, Lekwa and Barry. We want to hear from you as well as stakeholders. This is very important development. What important issue should we focus on, right? Nima, please share as well.
Yeah, Nima or Galila, do you want to introduce yourself by voice? If so, just come on. Hi.
Jalila, go ahead, Jalila. It's such a long time.
Hi,
share.
Wally, how are you?
Okay, I'll just.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Nima.
Hi, I think I wanted Jalila to go ahead first, and then I'll introduce myself afterwards.
Oh,
Better.
okay.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jalila.
I don't
Nima's gonna speak after
Yeah.
you. Go ahead.
No problem.
Okay, hi. My name is Galila. I'm part of the Tenant Committee in 285 Shooter. And it was just really nice to be part of this meeting and hear about what's been going on. Because again, like many other residents, it's kind of just been like rumors, like, oh, this is gonna happen. Like we've been hearing like whispers here and there, but it's really nice. Like I feel like I've learned a lot about what's actually gonna be happening or what might be happening. And I'm still happy that I'm able to be listening in the early stages so that I can give my input later on.
Thank you, Jalila. I know it might come very overwhelming. It's a lot of information. When I first heard about this, I'm like, excuse me? This is a lot of knowledge, right? So thank you so much for sharing, that you're committed to this, and thank you for your advocacy as a tenant rep. Really, thank you so much for that. Nima, you want to go next?
Yes. So yes, I am Naima, and I'm an early child educator. I'm sorry for the background, guys. My kids are running around. I just wanted to really add to what Jamila was saying. It's very informative and at the same time very overwhelming. And I kind of was wondering what would take place with the individuals that do there's this particular area from Shooter to Queen
Mhm.
where most individuals, or I believe they're homeless. And I just thought to myself, like, what would happen to them with that? Is there a plan for them? Yeah,
So you talk about the
that
encampments?
pardon?
The encampments?
I don't know what that terminology even means.
Encampments is like tents, you know, the homeless, like you said.
Yes, exactly. The tent. Yeah, exactly. Is who I'm a bit concerned with, and how that will affect them. Is there something going on with them? Is there a plan being developed?
I can touch on that,
Yes.
Go ahead, Darcy.
Nima, because I raised that at the first meeting. So there's the Metrolinx Mouse Park working group that Andre is part of, that we're all part of, but Andre chairs. So I mentioned that because it seemed they were talking about the trees, and that's that people have brought up the displacement of the trees, but they didn't mention about all the people that are living in the park. So what he said to my question, I had asked the same question, and he said that they're working with the city on streets to homes. So that's the city, a city supported project that supports housing of the unhoused folks. So so because a lot of the park space is going to be used, it's doubtful that they're going to be able to stay and that people will be displaced from this space. So I think it's something that should be continued to raise. And if you would be willing to come to the next working group meeting, and Galila as well, to keep raising that and to look for more of a plan, because the answer around working with the city was not really a full answer. I don't know if anyone else, Megan or anyone, has anything to add to that. But as you know, there is not the housing or shelter space really available. So obviously, if they're going to be in that space, then that has to be a priority, that those folks that are there get access to a decent housing. So I think we should keep advocating on that.
Excellent question, Nima.
Thank you. Thank you very much for answering.
Thank you so much, Nima, for raising that important point. I think homelessness, housing, being a crisis in this city is something that a lot of people connect with. So thank you for reminding us about, you know, paying attention and whether there's a plan for those that are unseen in many ways, right? So thank you. Likwa, go ahead.
Thanks, Walid, and good evening to everybody on the call. My name is Likwan Kala from Toronto Community Housing, the manager of Community Safety Support Central Region. I work with Barry Thomas and our general manager, John Kraljevic. So bringing greetings, first of all, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I think it's always good when we see community being consulted and involved in this way. Really excited to see some of our building committee, tenant reps present on the call from the TCHC side. Lisa, thank you for that nudge for us to make sure that we are present. Really appreciate it. I think for me, as I'm listening to everything, I'm looking back at some of the work that has already been done within our TCHC Moss Park buildings in terms of consultation. And the number one thing that our residents told us back in 2019 is they're worried about maintenance in general. And this speaks to things like pest control. I bring this up because anytime you're going to dig around in an area, particularly downtown, you're going to displace a lot of pests. So this is something which we're going to be looking at very keenly and being mindful about what sort of impact is this going to have on the surrounding community, in particular our residents at 275, 285, and 295, and a couple of other buildings in the area. I think the safety issue is definitely one to consider, just in terms of people feeling safe with the displacement of other folks, especially from the park. And we also have to think about the sound pollution and the congestion. So I think as TCHC, we're committed to being at the table, committed to attending always with our resident leaders, and even away from this table when we're meeting with our residents, just always having this as a topic of discussion, so that we have a plan and we know what we're doing over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Liqua, so much for sharing that very valuable set of concerns. I'm noting it down in our chat. You talked about not just noise pollution, but you also talked about maintenance, pest control, like some real issues that will affect folks in the interim while this construction is being considered. So thank you so much. Who would like to go next?
Rasha or Radhika, would you like to say anything? Or Chantel?
Can you guys hear my audio?
Yeah, I can hear you, Rasha.
Okay, good. I was texting because I didn't get my audio.
Your voice is a bit low, but I can hear you trying to say something.
Can you guys hear me now? Is that
Now it's much better.
okay? Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I know my audio is a little bit tricky, so I was chatting a lot, but thank you everybody who kind of came through and provided me an answer. Really, truly, this was a shock. I mean, I heard rumors about the Moss Park subway station coming, but the proposed changes are quite shocking. For example, loss of our public spaces, and just with what I was saying in the text box, how although we voted in favor of social housing along transit corridors, the province hasn't really signed up for it yet. So I think that's a major concern. And with Kai's presentation, a lot of the elements such as green space, jobs that lead to careers, social housing, as well as benefits for the community, these have to be realized. And I'm glad that we're forming a group to fight for these needs, because if we don't, I feel like Metrolinx really truly just kind of bulldozed over us. And I'm glad that we're putting up this fight to kind of say, actually, no, you need to listen. And these are the community recommendations. So I'm glad to be a part of this, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rasha. Thank you so much for that really well thought analytical contribution. Like, what are the provincial commitments to housing, especially around the corridor, and also like how shocking this news was, right? And can I ask you quickly, Rasha, how did you know about the Moss Park subway?
Well, I'm a part of the Park organization. Are fighting for how our local areas can change, and I've heard it. I believe you mentioned it, and then that's how it came about. And nobody really realized. No post government, no announcement from Metrolinx, and now all of a sudden it popped up with the full plan. That will probably be some city. So I'm glad that we have kind of now.
Okay, I didn't catch that properly. Did anyone else catch it? No. Okay, maybe if you could share that on the chat. I'm really interested in knowing how you found out about the subway station. Who would like to speak next? Okay, we'll probably then go back to the next pieces. Give me 1 second. So in the chat, please share your thoughts on one important need you wish to be addressed throughout this new development. So like what is the gap? So before we move on, here's a couple of Moss Park community planning principles that people could think about. So how do we renew the Moss Park neighborhood? How do we introduce pedestrian-friendly streets and park spaces? How do we design a safe and accessible neighborhood? So accessibility is very important. How do you involve the community in the process? So how do you involve more people? How do we build on cultural diversity, youth, skills, and energy? How do we create a diverse neighborhood with a mix of uses, including a range of housing, employment, institutions, and services? Because Moss Park for sure needs more support. How do we design a clean, healthy, environmentally responsible neighborhood? How do we increase the number of affordable housing units? How do we minimize disruptions for households during relocation? We talked about pest control. We talked about sound pollution. We talked about those issues. How do we develop a financially responsible strategy that makes sure that small businesses and other stakeholders are not impacted? How do we create a successful Toronto neighborhood with good jobs? How can Moss Park be a place where people have access to good jobs and they love to live in their neighborhood? And how do we improve the remainder of Moss Park during the redevelopment? So those are some questions to think about. Renew, reintroduce, design, involve, build, create, design, increase, minimize, develop, create, and improve. Some 12 examples of principles that we could look at. The next part is next steps. So I'd like to invite Kais to facilitate this part. Go ahead, Kais.
Thanks, Waleed. A really important sort of, section of our discussion now is, calling to action. What can we do? What are the things that we can do now to, make a change and get our voices heard? So I think the number one thing is, since we're speaking about the subway station and it being a substantial, part of the development in this neighborhood, is to just stay informed on the new Moss Park subway. Whether it's online or being able to attend important meetings that are happening throughout the city, information sessions, interviews, watch interviews, get into contact with, members of, Metrolinx who are holding certain information sessions regarding it. So anything that you can do to get to know about the Moss Park subway a lot more. Second thing is to keep learning more about community benefits. You can do so at communitybenefits.ca. We'll put the link into the chat. But it's an amazing way to be able to understand what's happening in other communities and how community benefits can be implemented and what we can do for the Moss Park community itself. With all these developments happening, we want to be able to have some sort of benefit that is coming out of the developments, whether it's jobs, and not just any jobs, as our councillor mentioned. It's jobs that are actually fit for purposes that are able to excel us in whatever field that we're in, and so they're meaningful jobs. And also contact your elected representatives. MP Marciane, Suzy Morrison, and Councillor Kristen Wong Tam as well. Be able to speak with representatives of our city who can provide more information regarding developments and how they can help further as well. And we'll put all their information into the chat so you can be able to get into touch with them. Stay in touch with the Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition. We're at the Moss Park Market on Saturdays, so 11 to 4. And we're there to answer any questions that you might have about what's happening in the neighborhood. Coffee and conversations is there, as mentioned, grab a coffee and we'll discuss. This is how we are able to bring specific concerns and information forward, is just having discussions. And those discussions, whether you think about it, those are what can lead to the changes that are going to be implemented. Also, contact the Moss Park Coalition and community groups in the neighborhood to learn more about how to join and get opportunities to be able to get your voice heard and be able to support the amazing work as well. The email for the Moss Park Coalition, as you can see, is on the slide. Reach out to the Moss Park Coalition with any of your inputs or any information you have regarding this meeting or in general how you want to be able to help out. The more voices we have, the better to be able to have a change that positively impacts all members of the community. And we also have an EA assessment consultation on the 2nd. I think Waleed has to touch on that point. Waleed?
Yeah. So we do have an assessment consultation that's coming up on March 2nd, and we'd love to hear from you. We will be sharing the information via email to those that have registered. So if you haven't registered for the event, please leave your email contact on the chat so we could share this information with you. It's important for folks to attend, to show up to the consultation, to contribute to the consultation, either in writing or through deputations, but it's important for you to be involved. So please look forward to that information. And I just want to encourage folks to email us to learn more about community benefits and to also join our discussions on social media. So join our team, and we're going to be putting some links in the chat shortly. And I'm going to quickly do some announcements. The one announcement that I want to point out is the Regent Park Neighborhood Association and Ally is having a monthly meeting next week on Wednesday, February 23rd from 6 to 8. They're also going to be commemorating Black History Month, and they're going to be talking about allyship, how to be an ally. The information is on the screen, so if you're interested, please do let us know. And I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of you for showing up tonight. I want to thank Kumsa Baker, my co-facilitator. I want to thank Darcy, Lisa, and all amazing friends from Building Roots. I want to thank Andre, who had to leave us earlier, but did a great presentation, who's also an active member of the Community Benefits Coalition. I also want to thank our counselor, Christine Wong-Tam, and the staff. Megan, thank you so much. I'm not sure who else I've missed. Also staff from Minister Marcy Ian's office. Thank you so much for joining. Please do share the contact information to stay in touch.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little bell notification. And don't forget to check us out on all our social medias. And if you want to see more, check our website.